Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Castalia Cocktails. Don't just drink cocktails, experience them. With matching scents and knowledgeable bartenders to guide you, it's a great experience. Try one of their pairings or feel free to go off Castalia's menu with an adventure for your senses. The menu both tells you how boozy a drink is, and there is a full, non-alcoholic lineup taking care to give you a top-notch sensory experience no matter how you'd like to drink. Whether it's the intimate indoor bar with less than 20 seats or on the patio outside enjoying the best Detroit has to offer, Castalia is a great spot for a night out, a drink after dinner, or a date. They're open to all Wednesdays through Saturdays from 5 to 11 p.m. with the possibility for unique experiences for small groups anytime with a reservation. You can learn more at CastaliaCocktails.com. That's CastaliaCocktails.com. Make sure to support the businesses that support us and stop on by. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit on a beautiful Wednesday, July 26th, 2023. I am Jer Stays, and joining me virtually is...
Norris Howard.
It is good to talk to you, man.
Yeah, it's good to be on the show once again. Very excited about the coming week and a couple of big updates for things happening here in Detroit. So I'm excited to talk about them.
Yeah, we're going to have three big stories today, as well as, I'm sure, whatever else rabbit holes we will wander into. I got to say, Norris, thank you for making some time because you're about to head out of town to another major city.
Yeah, man. About to check it out. About to slide over to our great Canadian neighbor, to Toronto. Love going over there. The wife and I like to get over there at least once every other year. And now it's time for us to do so. Last time we went was right before COVID, and I'm almost sure that I had COVID when I traveled. We just didn't know what it was back then, and I might have been patient zero in Canada, so sorry.
Oh, no. What draws you to Toronto so much? I mean, I do enjoy the city, but what draws you to Toronto?
It's a city that is fantastic. It works. It's clean. It's infrastructurally sound. The people are nice. Great food. It basically is New York without the rats, and Chicago without the pretentious people who think they live in New York.
See, what always struck me about Toronto is so much of the cultural diversity in various areas.
Yes, I love that. So, I'm always excited to go to Toronto and just have a good time out there. So we should be out there for a little bit and really enjoy ourselves. It's a non-working trip. Usually when we travel, we still work, but we told ourselves, no, we're going to chill out for this one.
That's a good choice. I find myself working all too many trips when I get out of town. All right, let's get into some stories. First off, tons of updates to our discussion that we've had the last few weeks. It's kind of been an ongoing thing. People have been very interested in it, and I've got some news pegs to talk about. First off is that the city of Detroit is going to be accepting applications for a second wave of recreational marijuana retail licenses. There are going to be 30 licenses for retailers, 10 licenses for micro businesses, and 10 licenses for consumption lounges. Equity applicants receive half of all licenses. So those are people who their primary residence is located within an impacted community or an entity in which at least one or more of such individuals owns and controls at least 51%. That's how they kind of worked it together to try to get more residents and other people. They had to really work this over the years legally to make this happen. So, it went from Detroit resident to impacted community. They had to work that out quite a bit. So one, seeing that happen. Two, the city of Detroit approved an expansion of where marijuana businesses can locate, which is a pretty big deal. And it kind of expands the map a bit. I will put up a screenshot from the city council hearing. And I will note there in that, though, that it continues to be a situation where there will be no marijuana businesses in the greater downtown area. And then thirdly, Chris Webber is rolling back some of his planned $175 million investment on a cannabis complex near Corktown on Michigan Avenue as demand has dropped for the product. 3 stories in one story, a lot to unpack, sir.
Yeah, I think on the first tip, finally nailing down who can get these licenses and expanding that, I think that is a fantastic thing. I'm really happy that they could finally get this ironed out because this was a cornerstone from which a lot of the lawsuits that came through against Detroit's marijuana laws were pushed forth, saying that, by allocating a certain number of licenses to Detroit residents, that was somehow unconstitutional. It went through the courts, and now they're using this impacted communities language, which obviously is going to be centered around mostly the city of Detroit. So I think that is inherently a good thing. Now, obviously, I think one of the big questions here is that obviously there's an allocation, but how many of those licenses will then get awarded, and then there's still money left over to actually build the dispensaries? That's sort of the question moving forward, because it's already going to cost a lot of money to get the licenses. And now you got to actually build the space, acquire the product, so on and so forth. But a step in the right direction for this. I think also when it comes to the expansion of where they could be located, what that actually means is that the cannabis retailers or consumption lounges, what the old rules were that they had to be at least 1,000 feet away from liquor stores and places that sell controlled substances. I'm also thinking that probably includes pharmacies as well. That's been reduced now to 750 feet. So a reduction there, not by a lot, but it does greatly reduce the distance from cannabis dispensaries from each other. So it used to be 1,000 feet that one cannabis retailer could be from another one. Now it's 500 feet. So essentially you could have 2 or 3 dispensaries in, one city block. So that's going to be an interesting development, and we'll see how that pans out. But the big thing, and I want to get your opinion on this, Jer, is that no marijuana consumption lounges or dispensaries allowed downtown. How do you feel about that? Because I have a certain feeling about it.
All right, putting on my corporate communicator's hat on, right? Like back in the day, I can understand why the corporate forces that be, there would be a number of them that might not like that. Okay, especially from like a tourism point of view. But then there's other people who are going to very much like that. And I think there should be some areas of greater downtown that it is allowed in, right? Like we've got strip clubs. Like to me, if you're going to have strip clubs, you can have a few consumption lounges. Like if you're going to do this, I do think, and this was floated a little bit in the conversation, and, thanks to Malachi Barrett over at Bridge Detroit, who does a newsletter and follows these things. That's a nonprofit news outlet. There is talk about kind of focusing where some of these things are. I think that's how it should be in greater downtown Detroit. I think it's all right if we say, okay, this is the block or whatever. I think that putting them everywhere, I understand why there's some resistance to it. Look, and I get some of the resistance that we've had in our inbox that has been very strong about more consumption lounges. I really appreciate a lot of the feedback over the last few weeks on this. And I think that if we can just focus it, if we can say, hey, this is where you go for it, I think it could be good. The thing is about that, you really have to put some infrastructure for it. So you need to make it so, there's easy parking outside of it, that people can come into it, that, you make sure that the drama is kept to a minimum. And I don't know all the ways to execute that properly, but that's the key to me, is to make sure that it's integrated well, that it's a fun time for all, and the focus is on fun, and we stay away from the drama. And look, statistics show that it doesn't increase crime. That was something that was brought up in these council hearings, but there are still a lot of council members and members of the community who think it does.
I mean, you be too baked to do crime. Like, you just be, just couch locked. Like, I've never heard of somebody going on a crime spree while super baked. But anyway, I agree with you. And I think, for me, as somebody who lived not too far from Greektown, it's already a red light district, essentially. I think if you kind of expand on that and say, listen, over here in Greektown, and maybe expand that a little bit to like Bricktown, which is only like an extra block or 2 blocks, then you say, okay, this is the area in which you can have that. And so you do have something close enough to the sort of touristy areas where if people are staying down there in the Greektown casino, if people are coming in from out of town and they want to kind of do like, oh, let me go and do the whole consumption lounge thing, you can do that because, as I've been to other places, not just in the US, but really internationally as well, that's what they have. They have areas that are kind of red light districts that it's just okay for you to be able to consume marijuana, and nobody thinks twice of it, And so I think when we're talking about downtown, I think it'll be cool to have something on the outskirts. Obviously, you wouldn't have it down in like Campus Marshes or anything like that, or Capitol Park. I understand that. And
Cannabis
to your
marshes?
point, no, we don't want that. Like, I'm going to be honest. I don't think that would be the best sort of look for the city. And on top of that,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the question to me is, what do you define as family friendly? Because I think a lot of people would define no cannabis consumption lounges around, like as family friendly. I feel like that's the intersection that's difficult here.
There's nothing about Greektown that's family friendly. So that's why I think it's okay to put it down there. Like, I've seen kids in Greektown after dark, and I'm just like, why? Why do you have your child down here? Like, this is not the area. You got, like you said, you've got clubs, you've got bars, you got a casino, you got strip clubs. Like, why? So if we already have an area of downtown or greater downtown that is essentially already zoned that way, why not just continue that? For me, once you cross over there in the Greektown Broadway, then why not just say this is where it's okay and everywhere else in downtown it's not okay? I think that's perfectly fine.
So what do you think about the greater business, though? This piece in Crain's Detroit Business highlights that Chris Webber, the former basketball player, was going to drop $175 million in a project. I remember covering this myself when it was announced a little while ago. I think it's around 2 years ago. Anyway, kind of citing that prices are down 54%, that he's still going to do something with the space, but it may not be really cannabis focused. And the quote in Crain's, I'll link to the story, "Where do prices settle? The bottom of the ocean," Weber said. "I am from Detroit and I love the city, the environment, and the people, but this would not be the best time for the community or us in Detroit to have a profitable outcome." And that's a pretty straightforward thing, and it kind of alludes to some of the concerns I've had about the market dropping out.
Yeah, and I think it's honest. I think it's him being honest about where the market is right now. I think also we have to look when we're talking about, marijuana dispensaries in particular. I think the added benefit of a consumption lounge does make it so that it becomes a destination, and I don't necessarily think that affects prices all the way, but it does make it a environment in which somebody would say, okay, I'm going to come and I'm going to buy some marijuana and I'm going to consume it. And I think that that's okay. But when it comes to this particular investment, this particular property, when you look at the mock-ups of the property, it's like, dude, why did it even have to be that? And I think that's another issue when we look at some of these dispensaries as well, is that, like, I'm all for having a space that's clean, that is professional, that looks like it's actually added something to the community as a storefront, but also at the same time is like $100+ million investment, for a space and for a marijuana dispensary. I just think it's kind of silly. It's not only not representative of the product, it's not representative of the community in which it resides either. I just think that was just so exorbitant to begin with.
To be fair, it's a bit of an integrated operation and involved kind of rehabbing some historic storefronts on Michigan Avenue. But I do see what you're saying, and that's a lot of coin, especially for an industry that, as we've talked about, is facing a little bit of headwind. So it's an interesting thing. Of course, dailydetroit@gmail.com. If you want your feedback, 313-789-3211. Let's move on to our next story. The Chevy Bolt EV is back. It was only like a quarter ago that GM and Mary Barra killed it very publicly, and now it's back in a earnings call and a press release. They talk about the demand for it and how much the Bolt is in demand by people and how it grabs market share from other car brands. So, thoughts on this? I feel like it's a step in the right direction, mostly because we need some affordable vehicles out there, and not everything can be a giant pickup truck.
Listen, this is, I think, coming directly on the heels of the F-150 Lightning announcement, where they've had to up the price. And, GM and Chevy looked at this and went, oh, people want these cars, but they don't want to pay that much for it. Man, maybe we can get into this market and control it. And I think also a big bellwether for them was the expansion of the Tesla infrastructure, allowing pretty much all the major American automakers to use that charging infrastructure. I think that lights a fire under somebody like Mary Barra and a company like GM, because as that infrastructure is expanded and as more people and more parks and parking lots and places begin to install this infrastructure and more vehicles can take this in, then the barriers to entry become less and less of an excuse, right? That was part of one of the big excuses beyond the cost, was that, oh, where am I going to charge my car? I can't drive it everywhere because I'm not going to be able to charge it. Well, it's looking like in the next 6 to 10 years that's gonna not really be an issue. So now you have the Bolt, which is the most affordable EV on the market, is going to be coming back out. And I think this is fantastic because you couldn't get them for a while. And now they kind of faded back and now they're going to be re-released. There's no sort of timetable. They're saying that they want to probably put one out next year, but there's no official timetable as when this is supposed to come out. But I think it's a great, not just step in the right direction. I think GM has to do it considering their commitment to convert their entire fleet to EV by 2050. Like, they have no choice but to do this.
Well, I will note that this new Ultium technology for the batteries that they're talking about, in the earnings call, Mary Barra, the CEO, said that there would be a 40% reduction in costs with this new battery technology. So I feel like this new Bolt is going to come out, when this technology aligns. And that is a huge deal because a huge cost of electric vehicles is the battery. And if they can truly get that battery cost under control, I think that's going to be crucial to the costs and the adoption, because that really is what it comes down to, is that, even, internal combustion cars to a lot of people, and we've talked about this off air a little bit, they're expensive to a lot of people. A lot of people who make decent money, they're still expensive. And so you really got to bring it more into parity so that you can, offset the cost you're not spending on gas, the cost you're not spending on oil changes, all the other stuff. You got to bring it into more parity.
Yeah. And, I think if they could get to a point where they can get the Bolt to like under 30 racks, like the person to come out with the first true compact budget vehicle is going to dominate the market. They're going to dominate.
You know what, though? I am looking right here, and the 1LT version of the Bolt for 2023, there's a couple dealerships that have it for $29,500. Now, a lot of them have it for $32,000 and $33,000, but I'm looking here, scrolling through this, and there's a lot that are the 2023 model that are under $30,000. So maybe some of that is the fact that it's being discontinued. That does tend to impact price, but I think it's a really interesting thing that this could easily be that car.
But yeah, if we're talking about the new Bolt coming out at MSRP 27, 28, maybe even 26 with this new Ultium architecture, like that is a world-beating price. That is a price that almost excludes no one. And you get to a point to where you can be the Toyota Camry of electric vehicles. And that is actually what's going to push GM into the next frontier, because obviously people can buy Teslas and BMW M3s and Polestars and all this type of stuff, but those are almost vanity items at this point, right? $60,000 for electric cars is almost like buying a vet. That's a luxury item for people. But if you can make it so the everyman, the guy can go work at the plant and build this thing and go home and buy the car that he built. Yeah, that's a fantastic concept. And the Bolt could be the first American EV to do that.
So for our final story, we're going to make some of our listeners groan, because we're about to talk a little bit of soccer, but not soccer in like the way that Fletcher does, in that, tactics and whatever. But there is a lot of energy happening around the Sevilla Crystal Palace game coming up this Sunday evening. And I wanted to share that I got word that there will be actually a tailgate on Columbia Street on Sunday, running from 2 to 6 before the match. And if you don't know, Columbia Street's in the District of Detroit. It is that pedestrian walkable block kind of from Woodward back. And, there's like Union Assembly and a bunch of other places along there. I like that they're putting so much effort into soccer. I think that that's a good thing. And even if you're not into soccer, and we'll get into the stuff that's there, I mean, this seems like a fun thing.
Yeah, I think it's one of those events that it's a combination of if you know, and if you're down there, you're just going to say, well, what is this? And let me check it out. And I think that's one of the things that downtown Detroit and Midtown, to a certain extent, actually could get a lot better at, of creating those sort of like, wow, what is this going on today type of events, right? And I think this is one of them. Obviously, these are two big clubs. And what I mean by big clubs is that they're very known. Sevilla plays in La Liga in Spain. Crystal Palace plays in the English Premier League. So these are legitimate clubs that are coming to Detroit, of all places, to have a friendly match. And I think this is really cool. And the tailgate party or the tailgate event that's happening before the match is just one of those things where I think it's a cool combination between what we do here in America and a distinctly European sport. You know what I mean? Because obviously we don't do the whole meet at the pub and march like DCFC does, that kind of thing, but that's not an American sporting event tradition, right? That's a European sporting event tradition. The tailgate, however, is fundamentally American. Fundamentally American, right? So I like that they're doing this sort of combination, mashing these two cultures together. So it's going to have a ton of cool events. There's going to be live music. You're going to be able to meet club legends from Crystal Palace. You're going to be able to take a picture with the Europa League trophy, which I think is kind of cool.
I know we're all three going to the match, but are
Yeah.
you going to come early enough so we can get a picture with the trophy together?
Yeah, we got to.
All right.
Like, that's mandatory.
All right.
I think it's one of those cool things. Like, I've never seen the Europa League trophy
And nor
close
will I
up and in
ever
person.
again.
I've seen the Premier League trophy up close and in person
Oh, where did you see that?
at the Emirates at Arsenal
Okay.
when I went at London. It's the gold one. I saw the golden one for the Invincibles.
Nice.
I think this event is fantastic. Even if you're not going to the match and you're just going to be in the downtown area, I would say come down and check it out, because I can't think of too many other opportunities that you'd get to have this sort of international sporting experience in the city of Detroit. We've had matches from clubs like this previously, but not with the level of fanfare and events happening around it. So it's going to be really exciting, and I can't wait to go.
So here's the thing. You've covered a lot of sports, esports. You've done and, doing like podcasts on soccer, but you're also passionate about American sports. What do you say to the person who's just skeptical about the idea of soccer in America? Because that's what I get. Like, I get the thing where it's like, well, we Americans don't do soccer.
Here's how I feel about it. First of all, baseball's dying, so leave it.
I think that there's some similarities between baseball and soccer, low key.
Actually, if you're going to make the comparison between two sports, if you're a fan of the NBA, you should watch soccer. And what I mean by that is basketball has the concept of like constant motion, right? When the ball is in play, play does not stop. Like, you go back and forth, you shoot the ball, you keep going. There's a back and forth to it. Soccer, even more so than basketball, has that, to where there's constant motion. There's always something happening. The best part is there's no commercials during the match. So you sit down and the match is 2 hours, and guess what? It's 2 hours. Like, that's how long it takes. And you're not there all day. You're not stuck. Most of the matches happen in the morning, so you could get on with the rest of your day. But the big thing that I'll say for the American sports fan who either has a desire to get into soccer or not is that one of the fantastic things about this sport is that you can learn more about everything else happening in the world, because it's really the only global game. And so you get to learn so much about not just geopolitics, but just understanding and having context for so many other places through this sport. I would have no desire to go to London if now I was not a fan of Arsenal. But because I've gone and because I follow the team and follow some of the players, I have so much more context when I was able to travel to London. And so many people are like that. They travel to Italy, they travel to Spain, they travel to Germany, and they have so much more context for the places that they're going to through these clubs that they support that are, thousands of miles away. And so I love that concept. And no other sport is like that, because clubs in soccer embody sort of where they are a lot more than I think many American sports fans really can connect to it. But the city of Detroit, I think, can, because you saw with the sort of going to work Pistons era and the Bad Boys era Pistons and the Red Wings, these are teams that have sort of embodied the spirit of the city at certain times. And we know what that feels like here. So when you watch a soccer match and you watch Arsenal, you watch Chelsea, and then you watch them play like Brighton or a team from Northern England like Newcastle. This is not just a clash of two teams. This is a clash of cultures. It's a clash of ideologies. Sometimes it's a clash of differing politics. So it's very, very cool to be able to see that play out on a field and play out in the stands. It happens a lot more than you would see in American sports. And I think that's sort of a element to this sport that really, I don't want to say we can learn from, but the energy in it, we can learn to begin to embrace. So that would be what I would say if you're trying to get interested in this sport, that you should check it out. And it has the best moments like ever.
Yeah. I mean, if you've seen anything with Lionel Messi playing for Miami lately, it's been insane. That's a whole nother conversation. I will mention about scoring though, because that's what a lot of people say. But here's the deal. A 14-7 football game is a 2-1 soccer match.
Mm-hmm.
A 21-7 football game is a 3-1 soccer match. Football kind of like gets you a little bit because they make you think that there's more points than there actually is. I feel like if like soccer played that same trick, more Americans would pay attention. But the scoring there is very similar in that kind of way. And if you're somebody who's used to looking at scoring, like you mentioned the NBA, there's like 100 points and all this other stuff. What would you say to the fan who is used to looking for a lot of scoring for the action they want to look for?
Treat it like it's the buildup. It's the moment before the moment. That's what actually makes the sport exciting, right? In the same vein of like baseball, where you see a line drive, it hits the gap, it rolls to the wall, and like, you know, the guy who hit the ball is just churning. He's rounding second, he's going for third, he might try to go home. That level of excitement and that anticipation of, can the left fielder make the throw? Is he going to hit the cutoff man? Can the catcher block the play? All those things you're taking in, all that information you're taking in anticipation for this moment that may or may not happen at home plate. That's the same thing that happens over and over again in a soccer match, where it's like, oh my God, the center back brought it down and he had a great outlet pass to the wing back who put the ball in a long cross. Can the striker get his head to it, or is he going to try to bring it down and hit it? Can their keeper block it? Oh my God, it's hit the post and bounce back out. What's going to happen? It's that level of anticipation of what's about to happen, that anticipation of what is possible in a moment, to where it leads up eventually to the golden second where the ball actually hits the back of the net. And that's why people get so excited about it, because you get to see, more than many other sports, the build up for how the goal actually happened from the beginning of the play to the end of the play. Sometimes can take 30 seconds, sometimes can take 3 seconds. And that's the beauty of it.
Norris Howard, so good to talk to you.
Oh man, it was great. That last question put me in a poetic mood, man. You can't just ask me that kind of stuff.
Well, that's kind of the fun of doing this. I know that you're traveling, so you skipping next week and then back the next week?
No, I'll be back.
All right. Feedback is always 313-789-3211 or dailydetroit@gmail.com. Quick reminder, I know it's annoying, but podcastawards.com in the news and politics category. Your nomination would be very, very helpful for us. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Remember that you are somebody. We'll see you around Detroit.